Freethinker Radio. You just heard the song Other Side by the band Ruiners. This is a local band here. I would describe them as indie punk. We're not live right now, but we are tuned in with Derrick and Micah, my buddies. How are you guys doing over there?
Oh, what's up, man?
Doing good. Good to talk to you. Miss you. Miss being at the station. Glad to keep
we're not
doing
all
this
together right now.
Yeah, for everybody listening, like Johnny said, we're not recording this live. We're actually recording it Wednesday night, March 25th, and broadcasting on Friday afternoon, as always. But we're all in different places of the world right now.
So it's documented that we are maintaining the man's social distance. Yeah.
Yeah. More than
6 feet away.
We're social distancing so much that I came to Mexico to make sure I wasn't too close to them.
I can't disclose my location.
Yeah. Okay.
Johnny's in a bunker somewhere. But yeah, we're happy to be here. 9.1 KPFT. We're always here Friday, 3 to 4. And we're going to try to continue that trend even during this coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown, the shelter-in-place orders, stay home, work safe, all these things. We do want to remind everybody, though, if you want more information about the Freethinker Radio, you can visit thehoustonfreethinkers.com. That's where we're going to keep you updated. We post the archives there, but we also will keep you updated with if there's any changes with our show coming up as, we're all going through the coronavirus situation right now in Houston and really everywhere. We've had people calling from Italy. Where else have we heard from people, Micah, who are dealing with this? It's really been getting to know people's situation globally.
Well, we talked to the gentleman from Italy, the last show that we live streamed. And we talked to that individual in San Francisco. Remember they Skyped in or something as we live streamed. And both of them, you could hear the concern in their voice. Something that I've been doing, I know we're going to get into the local news here in a moment, but something that I've been doing is looking at some of the other cities like San Francisco and in Washington State, some of their broadcasts from their city council, or not their city council, but their public meeting, whatever, where they're putting forth their city's ideas and their social distancing practices. The cities that are a couple of weeks ahead of Houston, since we're kind of talking about Houston always a little bit in the beginning. I'm hoping that by watching this, seeing the tone of the elected officials, the tone of the police chiefs, as the intensity of the pressure there, they call this thing right when it gets really intense, the peak. So, it's kind of like the eye of the storm or something. So, as they get more pressure there, I want to see how they're responding to their people, because I think it might be indicative of what we can expect here in Houston from our elected officials and police chiefs and such. Yeah, maybe more, maybe less.
We've even got, for the latest update, when everybody's hearing this on Friday, we're just a couple of days after Judge Lina Hidalgo issued a stay-at-home order, or what Houston, again, is calling the stay home, work safe. They didn't want to use the word shelter in place. And this was, of course, after we told you guys last week, I think we mentioned it on the air, didn't we, that the mayor, it might have even happened after our show, the mayor was threatening to prosecute people who are spreading quote unquote fake news in the city about the city going on some sort of lockdown or shutdown, or that businesses were going to get shut down. He said him and the DA and the of Art Acevedo claimed that, this is happening from state foreign actors. They didn't say the Russians, but they might as well have. And they
not a lockdown. It's a stay safe.
Stay home, stay safe.
Yeah. And, hey, we weren't going to use that exact language technically.
I mean, I think it
sounds threatening. Stay home, stay safe.
It reminds me of the Tuttles and them threatening the people who were questioning the HPD shooting of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. We know that was a fact. And if we had listened to them, then we would have shut up. We've talked about that over and over. And maybe this might not seem like a big deal to folks right now while we're worrying about everyone's health. And of course, we're going to talk about that. But it is interesting, as we told you last week when I called in, the mayor has now been given an indefinite emergency power order that, they have used it in the past with, let's say, previous hurricanes, but it's in a
indefinite.
It wasn't indefinite before, but he did claim that they're still under a state of emergency from Harvey, right? So my concern is just that they're dishonest, they're not being transparent, and unfortunately, the politicians from the local to the federal, they're going to lie to you and tell you, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. And then when they announce it, they're like, well, we had to do it. It was for everyone's good. So it just seems sort of an inevitability. And for the mayor to kind of put out these statements, and of course, Art Acevedo, to talk about prosecuting people who are spreading this information. And then here we are a couple of days later. And not only that, but Lina Hidalgo herself, and for those who are watching live on the video format of the show, you can see her on the screen. she later said that her and the mayor had been talking about it for several days. So he's saying publicly, oh, there's no discussion of this. It's fake news. We're going to prosecute people who are spreading these rumors. And then we find out, well, they've been talking about it for days.
Well, they had that judge in Dallas that locked it down there and said in his speech that they were going to do something similar in Houston.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So it comes from, it was already being reported before they were willing to admit it. And I don't know, I think it's important for us to hold these public officials accountable, even if it's during a crisis, right? Because as we've said on the show many a times, politicians will seek to take advantage of crises and push their powers. And we're going to get into that. That's going to be a theme, actually, I guess, for the whole show, huh? Every topic we're talking about is some example of power being pushed forward.
I feel like it's more important to be transparent during times of crisis, because he wants to go after people for fake news and everybody wants to say this is true or false. Like, it's important that, you know, the people that the information is coming down from should be consistent through and through and not this wishy-washy stuff. So I think it's causing even more confusion.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's definitely getting people to be confused. And that's the problem. There really is a lot of bad information floating around the internet right now, not just about Houston, but in general. There's been pictures and videos of people saying, hey, I saw these tanks going around. And I think a lot of that stuff is fake. But actually, Johnny, you have something to add to that as far as, you know, like, that's the thing here on Freethinker Radio. We get people who reach out to us and say, hey, we've seen this, we heard of this. We want to, you know, we're not going to run with it immediately. But after enough people are saying something, we might look into it. And I know, Johnny, you had a personal experience with seeing some military equipment of some kind for some purpose.
I just shared a video. I saw a video with my friend Michael shared where he was at a train tracks in Second Ward, pretty close to my house. And they were just loading up on lots of tanks and other military vehicles. So like the kind of trucks, the pickup trucks that would hold people in the back, or someone said they were medical vehicles. And, you know, people in the comments had different opinions about it. Some people said there's transportation of military vehicles all the time. I've personally never seen it, but, you know, I just thought it was crazy that they're calling the National Guard. So it's also crazy that it was going like west in general, you know, because why else would we need tanks to go that way, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think
if we were flying tanks overseas, it would be going east.
I think there is truth that, yeah, there are military transports that do happen, but it does seem to be at the moment while a lot of people are at home and a lot of people are keeping an eye on what things are going on. There's videos popping up from different parts of the U.S. saying, hey, look, we see this large transport. And as you noted, Johnny, the National Guard has been called out. So in different states. And I mean, there are some real concerns about this, Micah. I know that you mentioned Tillman Fertitta and some recent announcements related to his businesses and how that's affecting the local Houston economy.
Yeah, you brought this on the table about the $1 million. I hadn't seen it in terms of dollars, but I did see that he stated that 40,000 employees were being laid off. So, you know, in some ways, many people are able to go about their lives and do some of their job functions, but a lot of people are being laid off, and we're going to see this. We're going to see this economic strain, and we're also going to see the pre-existing economic conditions really come to bear on probably the weight of the future over the next 6 to 8 months that's just going to be with us for a decade or longer afterwards. So it should be really interesting. But yeah, a lot of people are saying, look, everything's open. Well, we're seeing reports to the contrary of that. And we've already talked about the bars being closed in Houston. I saw that Dick's Sporting Goods is closed. Many of the malls are closed. Some of these retails, I saw Target's open. But at the same time, people are saying, look, oh, it's no big deal, but it is a big deal. Think about it. How close is your average person to, you know, they say 2 checks away from homelessness or a check away from homelessness. A lot of these small businesses are very similarly positioned here in Houston, especially in the restaurant and bar industry. They can't, you know, take the time down. And we see in our feed various people being affected that way. But it is interesting to see one of Houston's richest men making a statement about it in terms of both money and in terms of employment.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get into more economic news in probably just the second half of the show. Of course, we're here for just 1 hour today on Fridays, and this is Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston. We're also going to be live on YouTube, and you can find us all our information at thehoustonfreethinkers.com. Micah, I want to go over a couple of, and Johnny, I'd like to get your thoughts on these, a couple of different reports from like the local area and also beyond Houston, but specifically related to people's experiences with COVID-19. Well, first I want to say that I definitely have heard from several people in the Texas area and Houston area who said they've attempted to go get tested. They're sick in different ways, but they each describe sort of a difficult, frustrating experience of being turned away and told to fill out this form, and they'll get something in the mail, and then they have to take a test, and that test could take 5 to 7 days. Meanwhile, we're being told that people are carrying the thing for 20 to 21 days. So there's a lot of people who are really concerned, who do feel like, hey, I might have something. I'm not sure what it is, but I want to get tested. And despite Houston announcing this week that they're opening up drive-through testing or these different testing stations, there are folks that have been having difficulty doing that. And I don't know if we made it clear, but just to reiterate for those who heard us talk about the stay-at-home order in Houston, it is closing most businesses and directing residents to stay put, except for groceries and errand, the latest measure aimed at slowing. And it went into effect last night, Tuesday, at 11:59 p.m., and it expires April 3rd. And then at the same time, on the federal level, you have Donald Trump saying that they are planning to, continue this 15-day period of quarantining and social distancing through April 12th for the entire United States. And then at the same time that, you have his advisors in the media and Bill Gates, for whatever he's worth, telling people that that's not long enough and we're going to need to be locked down further. And that if Donald Trump takes us off of social distancing and quarantining on April 12th, Easter, then everything's going to get much worse. So I don't know what you guys
hopefully he can loan out some money.
Bill Gates, well, he's ready to fund a vaccine for it. That's one thing. But Johnny, I mean, you were saying
the kind of loan I'm looking for.
You were saying, Johnny, you're still walking though. You're doing your job, right? You're able to go out into the public. You're visiting friends, right? From what you've been saying. No, I'm just kidding. No,
we're still allowed to service the medical community. So, service industry of I'm a dog walker, so I'm still able to help people who are physically unable to walk their dog. But honestly, as I'm driving around going to the dogs that, I don't have a piece of paper or anything, I didn't get a permission slip. But as I'm going around driving today, I pretty much noticed traffic was about the same. So I would have to say that a lot of people are either ignoring it or that most of the same, I don't know if it took away that much compared to what it was yesterday.
Hey, Derrick.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Go to that article with Lina Hidalgo and scroll down from that paragraph you're in. I think I read that same article, and there's something very important in the next paragraph down.
You might have to read it. I think I got the limit of my free Chronicle articles, and I can't see the whole thing.
Okay. And I wanted to see it there because I was a little bit concerned that I may be confusing it with Dallas. But one of the penalties of the violations are serious, though. They're up to
180 days in jail.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure we put that out there because while we're acting like everything's all soft and such, what they got on the books is 180 days in jail. If you
at the officer's discretion, not to mention. So the language on it is really sketchy, but the thing is, I guess they just have the paper behind it if they wanted to do anything, because at the officer's discretion could mean almost anything. He just wants to take you to jail or not. If
and it's hard to know
because you just have to say what, I'm going to the grocery store. Well, he either believes you or he doesn't. Do you have to tell him on your GPS look, I've routed to the grocery store. How invasive would that be,
Well, how's it get to the point of where they're doing the social distancing and you walk more than, within 5 feet of someone, or you and your girl are walking down the street, or you and your friend, or you're walking, all of a sudden all our groups are being told what they have to do versus facing 180 days in jail. It's just something to think about. I mean, this is the first wave of it. And I feel like this is sort of a drill to see what they can do. Maybe that's a weird way of looking at it, but
that's the feeling I get because there's a lot of news talking about this coming back in the fall.
Not only that, Johnny, as far as
in mainstream media, this is we have to get ready and prepare that this could come back in the fall. So I just feel like it's almost a foreshadowing in a weird way of like,
Well,
hey,
they definitely
doctors and
seem
stuff. I realize there's a flu season, there might be a corona season, and we don't know.
It definitely seemed to be foreshadowing that things are going to get worse in some way. And I think also more than even just the concerns about the virus, like we talked about it last week, and just this last week since our last show, I've seen so many articles in the mainstream press talking about the new normal, MIT saying things are not going back to normal. It's time to accept it. Like there's this message that's being pushed out. And I don't know exactly if that new normal means we need to get used to being on social distancing, staying home. We're going to move forward and talk about some stories, but we're talking about, they're really talking about how it's already going to change education. There's going to be more kids stuck at home to be educated because, like you said, Johnny, it could come back in the fall. It could come back next year. And MIT was recommending that every time there's a spike in cases, we quarantine and we shut everything down for at least a month. And then once things calm down, we come back out. And then there's another case if there's a spike of more than 100 cases, we should shut everything down and just be in a cycle of doing that for the next year and a half. So, I mean, there's really some crazy ideas and responses that are being proposed to this. I did want to share this one, and just because I want people to be aware of all the information. I know that we don't necessarily trust the government numbers. I mean, I haven't trusted the Chinese government numbers since this whole thing began. I definitely don't trust the U.S. government numbers one way or the other, but I think that obviously there's information there. And this is posted a couple of days ago on the UK government's website, which deals with infectious disease. It says, as of 19 March 2020, just about 5-6 days ago, COVID-19 is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease, HCID, in the UK. So it explains here, the Four Nations Public Health High Consequence Infectious Disease Group made an interim recommendation in January 2020 to classify COVID-19 as a highly infectious disease. They said this was based on the criteria about the virus that was available during the early stages of the outbreak. But now that more information is known, they're saying the public health bodies in the UK have now reviewed the up-to-date data, and they decided to change it. They no longer see it as a high consequence infectious disease. And at the end it says, quote, they have determined that several features have now changed. In particular, more information is available about mortality rates. And then it says, parentheses, low overall. So this is not the kind of thing that's being really reported in the press as far as like, hey, the UK government, their organization dealing with infectious disease just basically lowered their rating of the COVID-19 and said it's not doesn't have a high mortality rate. It's not a major threat. And I asked a couple of people about this. Some folks said, oh, this is just the government trying to get people back to work sooner, or this is, it's hard to trust their numbers and know what it means.
Didn't they lock down their countries? Or didn't they lock down all the countries?
They did lock down the UK for sure, and a lot of big parts of Europe. And then that's the other thing, Mike, I don't know if you've seen
They took it serious.
Like Lebanon and other places are bringing in the military to lock things down. It's not like they're just over here in Houston right now. It's a fine, a threat of 180 days in jail. But over in other places, they've got the National Guard or the military straight up locking things down. I mean, it's a really, really weird, scary feeling. And I just hope that our audience is really taking the time to think about these things. One other story that you guys might not have heard in the mainstream that I just related to this, and this is coming from a St. Louis article, which was originally posted from the New York Post. Seriously ill coronavirus patients at New York area hospitals are being treated with massive doses of vitamin C. And this is something that there was also a Chinese study about a month ago that found that the Chinese were treating COVID-19 with intravenous vitamin C. And again, you don't really hear much talk about this. There's even efforts in the mainstream to try to debunk this. But the fact of the matter is, Dr. Andrew Weber, a pulmonologist and critical care specialist in Northwell Health, has been administering 1,500 milligrams of intravenous vitamin C to his COVID-19 patients in intensive care. This was reported, as I said, in the New York Post. And it says, to put into perspective, each dose is more than 16 times the daily recommended dietary allowance. According to the National Institutes of Health, adult men should receive 90 milligrams a day, and adult women are advised to get 75 milligrams. So this is, like I said, there have been studies, and there have been studies recently, very specifically studying it in China. And as it says here, he disclosed the regimen was enacted based on reports of promising results after the experimental treatments were used on coronavirus patients in Shanghai, China. So, I mean, it's working in China. There's a doctor willing to try it in New York. And he said the patients who received vitamin C did significantly better than those who did not get vitamin C. It helps a tremendous amount, but it is not highlighted because it's not a sexy drug. So, I mean, have you guys heard anything about that, or what do you think about it? I've been stocking up on vitamin C and taking extra vitamin C more than typically, just as a precautionary measure, because it's good for you. But have you guys seen that anywhere in the mainstream?
I haven't
in the
seen
mainstream. I saw that article.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in the mainstream. And one thing I did think was interesting, just a side note in my travels, is that there were lots of oranges at the stores that I went to. You know, there's toilet paper gone and beans gone, you know, because I was trying to get some dry beans just to have some extras and such. And but there are lots of oranges. And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't this like flu season? And isn't this like a virus that normally, you know, regimens of vitamin C do help us, just, you know, something we take during flu season, kind of interestingly. But yeah, I thought it's interesting because there are a lot of vitamins out there, vitamin C and such. So, you know, I noticed that there were more people at the stores after they did issue that stay home safe thing. The Kroger right by my work has had more cars in the parking lot and such. So I do hope that in some of the things that they're buying, maybe this time at home, you know, maybe they can eat better, or maybe they can start paying attention to what they're digesting instead of it just being this relaxing, go out, get table service, you know, not have to worry about it. Now that they're forced to have to think about more of the food, maybe that aspect will come in, and seeing that vitamin C can help with lots of things like that, I think it's important.
Also, I want to remind people to check out your areas for different kinds of fruit trees, because my buddy Jeffrey and I have been finding tons of oranges and what we call loquats, which is like a random fruit, but it's delicious. And you can make like jellies and jams and all kinds of preserves, and obviously
jellies and jams
there on the spot. Yeah. Yeah. Food that'll last, you know, and yeah, just check it out. What was that app we used to use, Derrick? Right.
You're talking about the falling fruit?
Yeah, falling fruit. Show you fruit trees in your area.
Hey, should we take a music break before we get into more? I know I've got to cover some 5G news.
Yeah,
Micah, we got to talk about the Fed.
Juicy music break.
All right. There's one thing I'd like to say before we go to music break. Maybe y'all saw this, maybe you didn't, but Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, he said, well, you know how they're taking this stance that maybe there's maybe the cure is worse than the disease, and acting like they care about the economy so that when it's all messed up, they can say they did stuff to shore it up. Well, he was saying that, you know, he fits in that at-risk category, being old and all that. But that he thought things were more important, and he'd rather go on to work and all this. And I started thinking about it from multiple ways, like how, yeah, it's good for us to be able to go to work, but at the other way, you start hearing the term sacrifice more. Sacrifice. And it gets kind of creepy because, you know, he's talking about he'd rather sacrifice to have a good economy for his kids. And I'm like, okay, so what happens in a situation, you know, with that sort of thinking, in a situation where maybe the virus is way more deadly? And do people just get pushed back into work because you have to sacrifice for their economy, but you can't go to work for your restaurant or bar? I don't know, just some thinking.
Definitely a lot to think about. And when we get back, we'll talk also, Mike, I know they're promising people $1,000 to help them during these tough economic times, but it sounds like there might be some strings attached to that whole stimulus bill. And we'll get into all that. Who are we going to go to now, Johnny?
What do we have next? Let's do Chef Monsanto.
Yeah, people have been digging that song. All right, cool. This is Free Thinker Radio. We'll be right back.
this is what you're gonna say. Keep the mind of you, like I'm not you, and I'm Chef Montana. I know what I'm doing. Do you want the GMOs? I don't want no GMOs. Oh well, who want the GMOs? No one want no GMOs. GMOs! I don't want no GMOs! Well, who wants the GMOs? No one wants no GMOs! 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 No one! No one wants no GMOs! No one wants no GMOs! No one wants no GMOs! No one! No one wants no GMOs! No one wants no GMOs! No one wants no GMOs! No one! No one wants no GMOs!
Are you guys sure you want this stuff?
All right, guys, you just heard the song Chef Monsanto by Day Eater out of Austin, Texas. Another awesome band talking about really cool stuff, and you can find them on Bandcamp and all the things if you want to listen to more of their awesome music.
People have been loving that one, man. That's what I was saying. I know that people who've been watching online and listening, we've even had some call-ins and asking us about different songs that we play. We always want to play your suggestions. So even if we're not in the studio, even if we're not recording live to you, we also are open to your suggestions. Of course, you can visit thehoustonfreethinkers.com. There's an easy way to contact us on there. And if you want to drop some links to songs or your music or story suggestions, we're always open to all that stuff. Micah, should we go right into this 5G thing? It's been crazy. I don't know if you've been seeing it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we don't want to get so caught up in paying attention to the craziness with the virus that we don't see the things like the missile attacks and the 5G and et cetera.
Yeah. So last week when I called you guys, I was telling you that there were some local people in Houston and around the country who were starting to say that they were seeing activity at schools while the schools are shut down. Most of the schools are shut down. They're being, of course, the kids aren't at school, but they're supposed to be being disinfected and cleaning the schools and things like that. So people are seeing work vans, and there's a couple YouTube videos of people driving behind, looking at the vans, and a couple of them were involved in security systems, including biometrics and some telecom companies. So no real hard evidence of what they're doing, but people have started to take pictures and document it and call into the schools, and apparently are being stonewalled and not getting any information. So we talked about that last week, and since then, on that particular topic, there's been a lot more people who've reached out and sent me pictures of, hey, this tower just got put up last week. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, okay, maybe they're speeding up the 5G rollout that we've been talking about over the last year and a half while people aren't paying attention. And then sure enough, we're getting some confirmation of that. The article we're looking at right now is from edweek.org, Education Week. It says House coronavirus bill would direct billions to schools and fund remote learning. So again, it's a stimulus legislation. There's a lot of these stimulus bills in different ways coming out right now. And a lot of pork, as we've talked about before, Micah, they fit in all their different pet goals. It said it would create a $50 billion fund to stabilize states' education budgets, including $15 billion specifically for K through 12. So this is another $50 billion they're asking for, called the Take Responsibility for Workers and Families Act. This is also the same bill that I mentioned before the break, there's some strings attached. Like all these bills, this stimulus bill also includes, and at least one version of it, calling for the creation of a digital dollar run by the Federal Reserve and a digital wallet where people will receive their stimulus check. So if you want it, you're going to have to opt into this digital currency run by the government system. And along with that, they're also including money that will go towards funding 5G in schools, because they're saying since so many people are staying home and kids are, like a lot of college students are having to do remote learning for the moment, right? And they're saying that this could be helped by advancing 5G, moving it along. They're calling for installing more off-site Wi-Fi spots, connected devices for students, staff, and library patrons, more Wi-Fi spots. So yeah, overall, it's just another aspect of the stimulus bill that's being debated right now. As I mentioned, it has a sort of centralized government-run digital, I wouldn't call it cryptocurrency, but a digital currency. It has this money for 5G to be included in there. Then we have this bill that just was signed by Donald Trump. If you see right here on screen, March 23rd, 2020 became public law, called the Secure 5G and Beyond Act of 2020, introduced by John Cornyn of Texas. And if you see here, it was introduced March 27, 2019. So it sat there for a year. I went over here to congress.gov and was looking at the bill, and I looked at the actions just to see, what steps have been taken. And I noticed that Cornyn introduced it last March, and nothing happened to it. It just sat there. Then all of a sudden in December, it gets introduced into a committee. Beginning in March, it starts moving very quickly, and within days, it's signed by Trump and becomes law. And what this particular bill does, as CNET.com talks about here, Trump signs law to boost 5G security, broadband availability. It doesn't do anything specific like order the installation of a bunch of new towers, which would explain what people are seeing, but it does essentially push the ball forward on the whole 5G rollout. It addresses security issues, of which there are realistic issues, that having this interconnected Internet of Things, 5G smart grid, it's vulnerable to hackers, to other governments, to the 10-year-old kid in the basement who knows what he's doing. And so this is supposed to be addressing that. Of course, they're taking billions of dollars for taxpayer dollars to put towards this. And it says, under the 5G Act, the president must consult with the FCC, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, and other agencies, and submit to Congress a plan for rolling out secure 5G both within and outside the U.S. within 180 days. So it's moving very quickly. All of these things are serving, I'm sure many telecom companies are very happy right now that this is going on. And I don't know if I have the link pulled up. I want to show you guys one more, and I'm going to shut up for a minute. But I want to get your opinion on this. This article here from CNBC titled, "Why the Coronavirus Pandemic May Fast Forward 5G Adoption in the U.S." And they literally just lay out what I'm talking about. Just the key points here. The coronavirus outbreak and the rise in remote work has advanced the need for more robust 5G technologies, because everybody's at home, right? Everybody's using Netflix and Amazon and working from home. It's straining the network. Verizon issued a press release on Wednesday stating that demands on bandwidth have increased 75% over the previous week. The FCC and the federal government are already trying to accelerate deployment in urban and rural areas. And the final key point from this article, it says the global pandemic has forced a supply chain slowdown that could delay the expansion of 5G, but they're saying, this is a reason we need to speed up the enrollment. And as we just showed you in the previous two stories, one bill already passed and is now law, the Secure 5G and Beyond Act. And another part of the stimulus bill includes more money for 5G related to schools, in addition to a digital currency and a digital wallet. So all of these things are going on that are sort of side stories to the whole coronavirus pandemic, but they're not specific to like the virus itself. They're more like, here's what the government's up to while you're not really paying too much attention. What do you guys think about all that?
Well, they said for the digital Fed coin, what they were going to do was the U.S. Treasury was going to mint 2 $1 trillion platinum coins, and they were going to sell them to the Fed on credit. Okay, so on credit, the Fed was going to get these 2 platinum coins worth $2 trillion. And that's interesting because something that we'll visit later, the Fed recently changed the rules to require no reserves at all in the branch banks or in their banks. If anybody remembers the financial crisis of 2008, way back in the day, after that, there was some legislation put in place that required them to have some of their depositors' money on hand in case there was the need for it, right? But they just changed it to where no bank has to have any reserves. So that's interesting. But at the same time, they were going to print these two $1 trillion coins to become the basis for these wallets. So you would have, it's interesting, you would have the original money, right, that was sold, the original creation of value stored in an object, two platinum coins that were given to the Fed. Then the Fed would make the wallets and distribute it to the people that would take this. It's interesting because as you get one of their wallets or whatever, a lot of people will probably just leave it in the Fed. They're going to have pass-through wallets for credit unions and other apps and such is what they're speculating. But I've also heard that that's been taken out of it now, as far as they may not be able to get their new digital dollar in with this package. But like all bad legislation, it won't necessarily go away. And I don't know that it's necessarily bad. The point here, I think that what's happening is since we're not getting those two platinum coins in our hand, or even there's 327 million Americans, we're not getting 1/327th of those. So it's unfair no matter what at that point. So then I'm like, well, we're all the resourceful working people, they're all going to adapt to whatever system's thrust upon them. And they're going to get whatever they can. And they're going to use the digital dollar to go buy bread and gold and silver and guns. And they're going to use it to buy houses and all these things. But at the same time, it's going to open this whole new world of think about it. The Fed is going to control those wallets. The Fed is going to know about all.
Well, you can't buy anything without somebody knowing after that point, right? Would it only be strictly just digital? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how comfortable people would feel just not having something physical to hand to somebody anymore, not being able to exchange it for something physical. Because like
most people already do it.
That? Like
in a lot of ways, most people already do it. And I think because like I had somebody point this out to me that in a lot of ways, the cash exchange is already digital for most people because they're just, I guess they have the card, but a lot of it is still digital. So I think people will be really accepting of it. And I think, Micah, you're right that it's just like with the dollar, like if they're saying, okay, we're going to hold platinum coins for you and this is going to be, the representation of what those digital dollars are. Yeah, it's a stupid idea because everybody knows with crypto or with silver, with anything, if you're not holding it, it's not yours. If it's in a bank, like, yeah, they have it there temporarily, but something could happen. If you have crypto and it's in a wallet on some exchange, that's not your money,
Is this a separate currency aside from the dollar, or is this an extension on the dollar? That's my other question. Is it like creating like the greenback like Lincoln did back in the day, or is it you know what I'm talking about?
It would probably eventually replace the dollar.
Exactly.
Initially.
So it's a separate entity then.
It seems like an extension.
Economy.
Well, it would have a set value, right, from the beginning. And what's interesting is those people who didn't take their Fed wallets, what happens with them? Does the banksters just get all that money? I mean, you know how it is. People are dying all the time. Things are happening. People are moving. So there's a lot of people that won't have access to these wallets. There's a lot of people that don't even have cell phones or a computer, believe it or not. Yes, there are. And
it's interesting you say that, Micah, because this to me is why it's important for people to understand the difference between centralized and decentralized digital currencies, because one of the big attractions of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is that people are getting folks in poor countries in Africa and getting them like a simple cell phone, and then they can transmit value because in their countries they might be too poor to be eligible for a bank account, right? So they're cut out of the banking system, but then they can get cryptocurrency and somebody from America or from wherever can send it to some simple phone they have. And if they can get a basic phone, then that value can be transmitted in a way that it never has been possible. But in the system that the state will running, the Federal Reserve System, it'll be used in the opposite way, that if you're not a part of that system, if you don't have access to those tools, you can be locked out.
It can certainly be set up that way, but as they're saying in the literature now, what was being presented and looks like it's being shot down was the idea that there would be pass-through wallets so that the Fed wouldn't dominate. There'd still be competing currencies in the crypto market.
I want us to move on just a moment so you can cover the other Fed news, but I do want to say, Mike, I looked it up, and actually as for folks who understand the bills, like the way they work, there's several different versions. Right now, the Nancy Pelosi version, they did remove the digital dollar, but the Maxine Waters version still has it in there. So depending on which version gets finalized, because they're going to pass some sort of stimulus package, they're determined to do this. You got everybody from Donald Trump to Andrew Yang to Tulsi Gabbard calling for universal basic income now. Isn't it funny how Trump would normally say, oh, this is some socialist thing, redistribution redistribution of wealth. And, now they're all supporting this idea, but we'll find out when they pass the final bill whether the Fed coin's in there. But I think it is indicative either way, Micah, that they want to do something like that. And we've said that for years, that something like that was coming.
I saw something about them wanting to attach your personal identification to your wallet that would be attached to this digital currency. So I don't know if that means like your physical ID.
Well, think about this. Then you tie it up with
your social security card, like all that kind of stuff for driving would be connected.
Yeah, and that way you can be your credits can come from both your pay for your job and for your behavior.
It reminds me of that movie, Micah, from Freedom to Fascism that came out, almost 15 years ago. And it had a scene in there where it described somebody trying to order pizza, and the pizza was connected to the healthcare system, to the insurance system, to the this and that.
They said, "Oh, we saw you're overweight, so you're actually going to have to get like the low-fat cheese on your pizza."
Or you pay this extra tax. I mean, it's a really weird world. And I think this is the question that we want our listeners here, whether you're watching live, whether you're listening on 90.1 KPFT, to understand that the world is shifting, right? We're being told that we're moving into a new normal. And much like 9/11, which this thing has been compared to more than a handful of times, we're being told that, we're not going back to normal, that there's a new normal. And Mike, I think it's interesting that with 9/11, it was like the government was able to push for basically increase in surveillance, right? So they started violating people's freedom to be free in their homes, right? You get search at the airport, search at the borders. They can take your devices at the borders now. They can monitor all your computers. This is all legal after 9/11, right? And then at the same time, we see the push and the attack on the First Amendment. So I see like 9/11 helped push and at least erode the Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment. And now with this COVID-19 crisis, they're eroding the freedom to assemble, the freedom to gather, the freedom to come together and, effectively organize in anywhere if they're telling you can only have 2 people at a time. And I really do worry, and I want the people to take this in as much as they can, that the concern is that these powers won't just disappear when they expand them on the local level, the federal level, et cetera. We're seeing now that people will accept military lockdown. Some people are calling for it. They're shaming people. The media is calling for people to shame people who don't follow the rules exactly. They're threatening jail time. I mean, it's a really scary thing, and it's happening so quick that I want people to really take that in and understand the concern is not coming from a sort of conspiratorial mindset, but a very realistic mindset. You have organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the American Civil Liberties Union, and others who are taking note that there are some really dangerous things taking place right now. So I just wanted to emphasize that as we're here on KPFT, able to reach people and coming from a non-corporate community radio where we can give you truths that you're not going to hear elsewhere.
Definitely appreciate KPFT and get the opportunity to get outside any sort of partisan rhetoric with this. I would like to go on and talk a little bit about the Fed because they're we may have mentioned these points briefly. We talked about the FDIC recently releasing a video paying for an ad that discourages withdrawals. Meanwhile, we see that banks throughout the country are closing lobbies. Thank goodness these credit unions aren't. If you haven't already moved to a credit union, it might be something to think about. We've talked about the digital coin and creation of that. And this comes while the Fed Reserve rate has dropped to 0. Let's think about that just for a minute. They're saying we don't have to have any money in there. You can't come get more than 400 on average from Chase and these bigger banks that are closing their lobbies. In fact, in New York, they had a couple of banks where they actually did run low and close their lobbies because of the cash balance. So there have been moves and people talking about moves by banks to close branches rather than they even have to deal with this. Some people have reported not being able to go into their branch, like to take $3,000 out, even once they were in their branch, being denied access to all of their money. Now, whether all these cases are true or not, I don't know. But the fact of the FDIC releasing the video, the fact of the Fed, we have an article there from the Federal Reserve itself, Derrick, if you find that, where it does talk about they do right here reduce it in the very first paragraph. It changes their requirements to 0. Think about that. They don't have to have any of their depositors' money. And look what this is doing. Meanwhile, people aren't going to have money and the bank's not going to have it for them. And, it's going to come to the point where, yes, everybody's all happy about the helicopter money. We see people don't think about it, but the productive people are being looted by the Boeings of the world that want to go ahead and get $60 billion. When the money comes through and there's less goods available, then goods become available, and that's when we're going to get the run on it going up. So until then, I think what we're going to get is a lot of low price stuff, because it's a fire sale. People are trying to get that money. There's a scarcity of dollars. Dollars are strong. Meanwhile, all of European currencies been hit really hard. So even though this is going on, the dollar is remarkably strong. That doesn't mean that the banks still have a lot of it to pay their debts. And so that's why we see them printing and looking to print more and more. So I think it's
hitting the Mexican pesos too, Michael. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but the peso's been getting hit really hard the past couple of days, dropping really fast in value.
So I think now we talk about what do we do in the face of this? We need to take care of ourselves to get ourselves physically strong. We were talking about growing vegetables, maybe securing some money, buying some things, silver if you get the chance, ammo, whatever it takes, but like taking care of your true self, what's best for you in this time, because we're going to have some low prices for a while because demand has dropped. But then we're going to have that inflation come in right after the printing starts, and it's going to lift us to another level. And then a new bubble will start, and hopefully you'll have bought during the low, because if we already know these are their cycles and they're going to abuse it in this way, you can just take advantage of knowing their pattern a little bit. And I'd recommend trying it. I don't know what else to say. I mean, they're going to do it either way.
I want to add to that, Micah, if I can, as far as you talking about the positive things as far as getting, let's get some food. Johnny, we talked a little bit about this, about wanting to get people organized. Of course, you're being told in Harris County to shelter in place in many places where people are listening to this. But I think that there are different ways to organize, even if you can't necessarily be around people at the moment. Or, I think people should take their own precautions, what they think is necessary. For me personally, I'm stocking up on vitamin C every day, high dose vitamin C, taking some other things, getting some sunshine and air, because that's good for your immune system. And I'm not running around in huge crowds of people, but I'm not totally isolating myself either. But I know that there are people who feel that way. So I think it's good for people to be there in different support systems. But also, Johnny, you had talked about, getting prepared to get more community gardening and community in general, so that people can find some of that support system that they need, instead of maybe making the choice of, do I want to join this FedCoin digital dollar system because I really need help? You find ways to work with your community, and maybe you don't need that as much, and maybe you have other options, or, so let's talk about that for a second, Johnny.
I don't know. I guess our main purpose with that was, regardless, without even speculating anything, we know that the next couple months are going to be really rough, and you want to be able to build up yourself and, be in a position to build up your community as well. If y'all aren't being able to afford to go to the grocery store, or that $1,200 doesn't go as far as you thought it would. So now is kind of the time to plant food, and there's probably a local garden close to you that can help you learn how, just put your food scraps in the ground. Now is the time to Google it. It's not super hard. And, here in Houston, you can connect with the House of J, and we will help you out. We're collecting as much compost as possible. But yeah, it's the springtime, it's a good time to plant, and that's always good skill to know, just regardless of anything. But if you can put flyers out to your community and try to reach other people, try to find ways to reach people other than, obviously gathering in large crowds. So you have to get kind of creative.
And I saw a roadside vendor on 249, and it reminded me that these people are out there, especially if you're out in the suburbs or you transit the suburbs to get to your essential working job. And those people, they probably need the support now more than ever. And again, it keeps you out of the grocery store and gets you the vitamin C. I wanted to ask you guys a question real quick. I know we're getting to the last few moments or whatever, but I know y'all are old enough to remember 2008, and remember back then when they started talking about the stimulus and the bailouts, and how there was this distaste in the general public's mouth for it. And all kinds of people from left and right were standing up and talking about Occupy Wall Street and don't just bail out these people and banksters. And now we're talking about, instead of the car industry, we're talking about Boeing and even private air, which is actually, private air travel has been up since Corona tremendously. Yet they're stepping up for a bailout too. So have y'all, like, I feel like there's no real opposition to it. And it's just like standard procedure now. Like nobody even questions whether stimulus packages and bailouts are the business of America.
I think you're right about that, Micah. And
what other option do they have?
Well, I mean, I feel like, Michael, one thing that's changed since 2008, even just here we are, we're just 13 years later, right? And things have changed so quick that the media has completely deteriorated in that time. You know, whatever media was there at that time that was investigative is not there in the mainstream. In fact, now, you know, the Goldman Sachs relationship with another bank's relationship with the U.S. government has gotten more entrenched, and with the media, you know, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, look at Munchen's history. And you're right. The media has deteriorated beyond the point. It was already bad. It was already, you could see this place was arguing this way, this place was arguing that way. But at this time, it's like all the media is just apologists for what the story is going to be anyway. Like it's all just telling you the, you know, point of view of the elite. Occasionally you'll hear a little bit else, but you're right. These factors have really changed the outlook of your average person. And, you know, to answer Johnny's question, there are other things they can do. They just won't because they want to hold on to their power.
Well, I know we're winding down the last few minutes, and there's a couple of other important stories that both of us wanted to touch on that kind of expand from. We've been talking about the economic power grab. We were talking about some of the 5G push forward while nobody's paying attention. We're going to look at two last articles, and these are from mainstream press. One is from Newsweek. One is from Rolling Stone. The first one is an opinion piece from Eric Swalwell discussing new bills that are also being discussed and new efforts as a result of the coronavirus. It says the Attorney General's power grab in the shadow of the pandemic is unprecedented, unconstitutional, and unnecessary. Micah, what's this all about?
Well, they were talking about having to suspend habeas corpus to keep order, you know, and what is habeas corpus? It's that old thing of show us the body. So when you're arrested and they take you to court in front of people, things like that, where you're arraigned and then you go for your day in court, well, they're saying, you know, in this emergency time of, I don't know how many people have died in the U.S., 200, I don't even know anymore, that we need to basically give up our right to a trial. We need to give up essential natural liberty to the government so that they can keep order. Like it's that chaotic. That's what our Justice Department is saying. And I want to know how y'all think, the two of y'all, with the word Justice Department, while they're saying we don't have to give you a trial. We don't have to honor habeas corpus. It was suspended during the Civil War by Lincoln, but it's not normal. This is like tremendous.
I mean, for a sickness, habeas corpus, like that doesn't make any sense.
And then the one over here on Rolling Stone, it says, this is a similar story. I think it's related to the same topic, but just to give you an example, the headlines, DOJ wants to suspend certain constitutional rights during coronavirus emergency. The Department of Justice has secretly asked Congress for the ability to detain arrested people indefinitely, in addition to other powers that at least one expert has called terrifying.
You see, the scary part about that is because America was built on the fact that we believe all people have the right to at least defend themselves. And everyone is an individual. And when you take that away, you know, the innocent until proven guilty, even though, you know, you do get thrown in the back of a cop car, you're supposed to, that is your last, you know, right. And that's your last taste of humanity, really, because it's just inhumane to throw someone in a cage without giving them a chance to explain themselves, regardless of any of the situations. You know what I mean? That's just a tyrannical approach.
And I'm pulling up another one here from Vice.com. That is another, there's been several, I could pull up a half a dozen just on this. COVID-19 could provide cover for domestic surveillance expansion. The use of location data to help track and manage the pandemic should come with meaningful safeguards and expiration dates. Also, they're, you know, expanding facial recognition, thermal imaging cameras. In China already, the cops have these augmented reality glasses that can detect your temperature. And if if you got a fever, if they suspect you have a fever, then they can arrest you or quarantine you. I actually have a whole folder just dedicated to articles that are discussing the expansion of surveillance in the U.S. as a result of the current pandemic, and actually doing a reasonable job calling it out. So, I mean, the headlines are out there for those who are looking about them, but unfortunately on the 24-hour cable news cycle, they seem more concerned about, you know, just talking about the virus. And again, the deterioration of the media, they're not doing a good job helping people see the full picture, the full scope of what's going on.
Yeah. I think that's really important. It's so then the people are left in a sea of looking through alternative media, diverse mainstream media. But in the end, they got to evaluate what they've experienced in their lives, what they've read through literature, and their basic human skills of reading people, because we're in that time now. We really are. And as you've pointed out, the loss of any sort of actual journalism is crippling in a way to a republic where you expect people to make decisions. They're misinformed. How are they going to make the right decisions if they're misinformed? I do appreciate Johnny's closure of the last show where he was saying, that we've overcome a lot of things as a people. All right. So I think the main thing that we were focusing on just recently with the economic and the stretches by the Department of Justice to grab both money and power. And I don't know how much of this we're reiterating at this point, but we see Boeing lining up to, loot in the side of corporate America and get their money. And we see others lining up. You mentioned how the telecoms were, pushing through 5G and looking for finance there and the stimulants, and also the Fed itself. And on the other side, we see the Fed expanding the money supply or attempting to with these checks given to everybody. So, but I think the main thing that I was saying when we were closing out is that last show, Johnny said something that was really important at the end of the episode, saying that we've made it through a lot of things as a people. And at the point he was talking about America, and I think that's true. But I also think it's true that the world's people have made it through a lot of stuff, and that we're going to, through this, we're going to be stronger. We're going to get to a freer place, and we're going to learn more about ourselves and our immediate family, our communities and such. So I really did appreciate that Johnny had said that at the closing last time. And I think it's an important point, and that we do focus on, our wellness, our health, and what little we have of wealth, and try to take care of people around us and be aware that